Today I've got a John Deere string trimmer. This is a model S1400. And this particular one didn't quite make it out to the trash pile. In fact, it belongs to my neighbor, and he had just been experiencing a few issues, and I'll talk about those here in a bit, but was pretty much fed up and to the point where he was just going to throw this one away and buy a brand new one. But before we did that, I just said, well, let me take a look at it. We'll see if we can get it fixed up, and that way we can return it to him so he can go ahead and continue using it. So I think this will be a fun one to get into. We'll explore some of the issues he's experiencing, see if we can fix them. And so let's go ahead and start diving in. This particular trimmer has a 30cc engine. It's a Home Light Consumer Products engine, and it's model number UT20810. Now, his biggest complaint was that it was leaking oil, and you can see here on the bottom it's just a lot of thick oily residue on the body of the trimmer, all the way throughout. You can see on there top of the gas tank. So there's a number of contributing factors to something like that. Could be improper mix of oil to gas ratio. It could also be when using the trimmer, if used often or most of the time at a lower or mid RPM range, it does not allow the muffler to actually heat up to a temperature to burn off that excess oil. And then in that case, you just have a buildup of oil residue in the muffler, and that just seeps out and just coats the entire engine. So we'll get into the muffler, look at the spark arrestor, see if that needs cleaning. He also at some point replaced the carburetor on this one, and I don't know what happened, but you can see here this fuel line barb has actually broken off. So we'll put a brand new carburetor on there to address that. I'm seeing wire lead that comes from the kill switch here is not connected, so we'll return that to where it needs to go. Take a look at the spark plug, see if perhaps it's just running too rich, right? So that could be another reason for seeing all this oily residue. So we'll see what kind of things we can determine from the spark plug, and let's start pulling the covers off, get inside. So right off the bat, I'm seeing there's already screws that are missing. So someone has obviously been in here before. Also down here on the bottom, this lower area here, some screws missing. Seeing some of that oily residue here on the inside of the cover. I'm seeing here around the spark plug, though, I don't know if you can see that. Let's see. I'm seeing that wet oil there on top, and it has me wondering if maybe the spark plug is just loose and it's just coming out of the chamber, and the spark plug is loose. Yeah, as you can see here, see how wet that is around that spark plug, and there's really no oily residue around the muffler. So I'm wondering if just that spark plug was loose to the point where while running, the fuel and oil mixture was just seeping out, which I guess is a possibility, because a lot of the oily residue is around this cylinder head area here, and then drips down deep into the around the engine. So that's interesting. We'll continue to keep looking now. Let's go ahead and get into this muffler and spark arrestor and see what we've got there. muffler is also extremely loose. So all these things are starting to come together. So yeah, if that muffler is loose, that exhaust is not fully passing through the muffler, in which case all the oil is not being burnt off. So that could certainly contribute to the oily fuel oil mixture that's surrounding this engine. Let me just go ahead and take the entire muffler off. Mismatched screws. One is a Torx head, one is a Phillips head. Probably not by design. As you can see here, a lot of oily residue coming down in there. But right now I'm leaning towards certainly that muffler not being on there as tight as it should be. Yeah, I mean, you can see all the oily residue that's leaking down in here. See what the spark arrestor looks like. Looks like it may have been removed at some point. I can see the kind of the remnants of a screen material being there, but there's certainly no screen here. So that must have been removed at some point. Okay, let's see what our air cleaner looks like. Air filter looks good. No issues there. I'll go ahead and pull this air filter body off and just go ahead and remove the carburetor, since we're going to be needing to replace that anyway. And I was trying to remember, I think it was a conversation with him where he had actually mentioned that at some point he had mixed his fuel with 2-cycle outboard engine oil, which you certainly don't want to do. So that's certainly not helping his case at all. I want to go ahead and get the gas tank out as well, just so I want to get in here and just clean all this up. That way when we do get everything tidied up and put back together and we try to get it running, and if it does run, we can get a good visual on seeing if we're continuing to see oil spilling out of somewhere or not. Okay, fuel tank's removed. We'll go ahead and clean all that up. Go ahead and replace these fuel lines for him, and also probably replace that filter that's in there. Easy enough to do, and if we're going to replace the carburetor, might as well put new fuel lines on there as well. Alright, so now I'm just going to take a degreaser. I'm just going to clean this engine up a little bit so it's a little more presentable, and then just gives us a little bit better opportunity to do some troubleshooting if after we put everything back together with the new carburetor, if we continue to see some oil leaking from one point on the engine. But if you can tell, most of that is actually all just on that exhaust side of the cylinder head. And again, that muffler was just sitting on there very loose, so it doesn't surprise me one bit that we're seeing all that oily residue. Okay, next I want to see if I can get this front casing off, and that should give me access to the coil on here where I believe that kill switch lead is intended to be connected. So there are 2 screw holes here on the bottom. Neither of those have a screw in it, and then there's 1 screw in here, and then there's a second screw holding this little bracket on, which supports the throttle cable. So we'll go ahead and remove that. And the second screw that's in here. And I'm hoping that'll free up that engine so we can go ahead and slide that out. Have to hit these 4 screws as well, so we'll do that. Okay, let's see what that gets us. There we go. Okay, so that's free. Got a couple wires to disconnect. I'm going to have to bind up this cylinder, because right now as I turn that screw that's inside this assembly, you can see the piston going through its cycle. So one way to do that is to actually fill that with like a string material. So let's go ahead and do that to stop that up. So I just have some wire material which will serve the same purpose, and the idea is just to fill that void so the cylinder or the piston cannot complete the full cycle. And that should prevent and hold this tight. Yeah, there we go. So free that up. There we go, and that clutch assembly should come free here. Let's see. So that worked. This is just a little wrench I have for one of my angle grinders to tighten the disc on the shaft. There we go. Try to have some tool similar to this one that actually can grab the center structure of each one of these plates rather than the outside, which can affect the actual circumference of this piece of metal. Alright, so now that we got those off, this engine assembly should slide right on out, and it does. So So now I'm curious as to where, on this kill switch, where this wire lead would go. What I thought this did is when you actually press this kill switch, it would actually ground out on the body of the trimmer, and I would expect this to actually connect somewhere on the actual ignition coil here. And there's only one connection point. You do have the kill switch on the actual handle assembly itself, so you do have that feature to stop the engine, but I'm not sure when looking at this where this lead goes. Like so. Then we've got the washer. And first plate. Okay, so we got those on tight. Next we'll put on the clutch here. It has that center torque screw. Get that tight. Got a couple screws that hold the engine to this plastic body. And there should be four. 1, 2, 3, 4. But I only got 2. Let me see if I've got something with this thread. So I found some screws that are used with some toggle bolts, but the thread is right. So I'll go ahead and cut those down to size, and that way I can use the 4 screws to properly secure this housing to the engine. It's a 10 by 1024 thread, so I'll just use these pliers here, and this will allow me just to cut the length of the bolt. Alright, so there's one. I'll just go ahead and repeat that for the second one. Okay, you got both of those cut, so go ahead and add those here. So first one. Second one. Turn the shaft assembly on here. Like so. Okay. I'm going to see if I've got a replacement spark plug. It's an RCJ6Y. I may have one of those. So I went ahead, I just reinstalled the fuel tank, ran new fuel lines, put the muffler back on. So all that's pretty straightforward. So let's go ahead and put the carburetor on there. This is one that I picked up off eBay, less than 20 bucks. So we'll go ahead and throw that on there. It came with the gaskets, actually came with some fuel line as well. So one thing I also did was remove that kill switch that was originally in here. Just one, you don't need it because it's redundant to what we already have on the handle, and secondly, I did not see a good spot to land that wire terminal. So for that reason, I just decided not to install it. Go ahead and reinstall the fuel lines. Okay, that's ready to go. Go ahead and reconnect my kill wires here. Did end up having a brand new spark plug, so we'll go ahead and put a new spark plug in there. Filter housing. Rear housing back on. Let's see. I did make myself another screw to account for what was missing. Okay. So I think that's it. We'll go ahead and throw some fuel in there and see if we can get it started. Alright guys, so I went ahead and ran it for a good bit. and no apparent leaks at this time. I'm not seeing any oil accumulating, but still early. So I'll go ahead and return it back to the neighbor, let him use it. And if we have any problems, we'll just revisit it. But looks like everything is good to go. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate it. Hopefully you learned something today like I did. And we'll see you next time.